If you're 60 years old with $2 million saved, you might think you've earned the right to walk away from work for good. But the real question is, will that money last 30 years or more without a paycheck? Today, we're putting that to the test with a case study. Retiring at 60 before Social Security and Medicare kick in and seeing exactly what it takes to make $2 million last. We'll run the numbers, stress test the plan, and reveal the small changes that can be the difference between running out of money and retiring with total confidence. I'm Rob Gariano, and as a retirement advisor, I've worked with dozens of people in this exact scenario. $2 million might be enough, but we won't know for sure without exploring the key risks, trade-offs, and whether this couple's plan actually holds up under pressure. But before we crunch the numbers, you need to meet the couple we're modeling today, because their story might sound a lot like yours. Meet Paul and Linda. They're both 59 years old, living in New Jersey, one of the highest tax states in the country, and wondering if they can retire together when they turn 60 next year. They have 4 grandchildren who live nearby, and moving away really isn't an option. They want to be part of the daily life of their grandchildren. Linda has a part-time job, and Paul has spent decades in a very high-stress career that keeps him on the road far too often. Linda's worried about his health and wants to enjoy their early 60s together when they can still get out and travel. Paul would love that too, but just isn't sure if they've saved enough. After nearly 4 decades of hard work and disciplined saving, they've built up a nest egg of about $2 million, consisting of Paul's 401k of $1.6 million, Linda's 401k of $350,000, and a $200,000 joint brokerage account. Most of their retirement savings are in pre-tax accounts, which means every withdrawal will be taxed. And covering healthcare before Medicare kicks in could become one of their biggest expenses. In retirement, Paul and Linda picture a slower-paced life. More time at home with their grandchildren, regular travel in their first 15 years of freedom, and the ability to pursue hobbies they've put off for far too long. But they're unsure if their plan's realistic. The higher travel spending early on, the cost of private health insurance until age 65, and the uncertainty of market returns have them wondering if $2 million will really last the 30 plus years they might need it to. Or will they risk running out too soon? If these concerns sound familiar and you'd like to go through a planning session like the one I'm about to show, I encourage you to click the link in the description below. You'll answer a few questions about your particular situation, and within 48 hours, I'll have a personalized video sent over planning the retirement you dreamed of. Let's get back to Paul and Linda. The challenge for Paul and Linda, and for anyone thinking about retiring at age 60, is that leaving work this early creates a dangerous gap. If they stop working next year, they'll have 5 years until Medicare kicks in, which means they'll need to budget about $12,000 every year for a private pre-Medicare health insurance policy. Now, that's on top of their current $7,000 per month of after-tax living expenses. Plus, we budgeted an extra $25,000 per year in travel for the first 15 years of their retirement. Social Security is at least 2 years away if they claim early, but they could delay up to 10 years for the higher benefit. That decision matters because until they start claiming, every dollar they spend will come directly from their investments. In fact, their first year of retirement would require withdrawing roughly 7% of their portfolio. They mentioned something about the 4% rule and think 7% is well above the typical safe withdrawal range. Now, that number would remain high until Social Security benefits begin, which makes them very nervous. And timing's everything. One of the biggest threats to early retirees is something called the sequence of returns risk. That's when the market delivers poor returns early in your retirement. And because you're already making withdrawals, those losses lock in permanently. Even if the market recovers later, your portfolio might not, because you're drawing from a smaller base of investments. It's the financial equivalent of starting a marathon with an injury. On top of that, high inflation in the early years could push their travel and healthcare costs higher than planned. A sudden health event could end tens of thousands in expenses and fixed costs, like housing, healthcare, premiums, and taxes, could slowly eat away at their budget year after year. Any one of these risks could shorten the life of their $2 million nest egg. So before they decide to step away from work, they want to know, will $2 million really cover their lifestyle and these risks for potentially 30 years or more? Or will early retirement come with trade-offs they're not ready to make? During the onboarding phase of our client relationship, we gather all the necessary documents and information to pre-populate a baseline plan. Now, this baseline plan is what we use first to analyze the client's current situation before making any changes whatsoever. And then we can tweak certain variables to bring the plan in line with what we would like to accomplish. We did exactly that for Paul and Linda here in our Income Lab software. What you are seeing here is their baseline plan. And this is exactly what we use to make decisions in regard to their income plan moving forward. We explored 3 main variables to see if Paul and Linda's dream of retiring at age 60 would be feasible. First, the sequence of returns risk. Next, whether Roth conversions made sense. And lastly, what is the optimal time to take Social Security? First, we want to see what the Income Lab's spending capacity is, which is the amount of income they can sustainably take on a monthly basis if they agree to make some slight future adjustments, which we'll talk about shortly. The sequence of returns risk is taken into consideration here as well. This is something they were very concerned about, if you remember. If the market were to take a downward turn right as they enter retirement, when they are also making portfolio withdrawals. As you can see here, Income Labs has suggested an initial withdrawal amount of $156,000 of gross income. And that is all coming from their after-tax joint account. This covers all of their pre-Medicare medical expenses, the extra travel, plus their normal after-tax living expenses. Now, their baseline plan follows the taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free withdrawal schedule for those that are familiar. And for those that are not, that simply means to limit taxes initially, the Jones will begin taking their retirement income paycheck from their after-tax account. Then, beginning in year 2 of retirement, as you can see here, they will start taking withdrawals from their tax-deferred accounts, which in this case are both Paul and Linda's 401k. You could also see here in the expense category that their taxes go up in year 2. Now, this is because their tax-deferred accounts are pre-tax. So each dollar withdrawn creates $1 of taxable income. Now, getting back to their $156,000 of gross income in year 1 of retirement. Paul and Linda are satisfied with the recommended amount they can withdraw, but are concerned with the high withdrawal rate, which in their case is 7% here. They mentioned that they had read somewhere that 4% was the correct withdrawal amount during retirement. Now, I told them that their retirement income planning is not a static picture, but rather a flexible and strategic endeavor that needed to be adjusted as new information was presented, such as new market environments or unexpected expenses. This initial high withdrawal rate would last until Social Security kicks in at full retirement age. Now, this isn't yet a recommendation for them to take Social Security at full retirement age, but if they were to begin then, it would reduce their withdrawal rate down to around 4%. Now, as mentioned, the first variable we want to tackle would be the sequence of returns risk. For that, we open up the modern guardrails inside of Income Labs. This here is showing when the Smiths might need to make a spending adjustment. When I hover over this lower guardrail portion, you can see that between a poor market and their withdrawal rate, their portfolio would need to drop about 28% before a spending adjustment would need to be made. Not only that, but even with such a large drop in portfolio value, their withdrawal amount would only need to be decreased by about $490 a month. We also stress tested this during a worst case scenario, such as the global financial crisis, just to see if a pay cut was needed to sustain their plan. And we determined that for Paul and Linda, they would not have even had to take a pay cut during this time at all. This would have been indicated by a red dotted line. But instead, what you see are green dotted lines, which meant that their income would have actually increased over this time period. This made Linda especially happy, since she really didn't want an unlucky event to change their retirement spending, since she really hasn't been able to spend quality time with Paul during his working years. Next, we moved on to Roth conversions. Now, Paul and Linda had heard about them, but weren't sure if it made sense for their particular situation. We used Income Labs to dive in and answer this question for them. What we saw was that Income Labs was suggesting that Paul and Linda should fill up their 22% tax bracket during their early years of retirement in order to save on the amount of taxes they would pay over their lifetime. This is a large number that you see here. They would save $853,000 in total taxes with this strategy. But we aren't just looking at this in a nutshell. This should be compared to the break-even age. And as you can see here, this table shows the cumulative taxes paid at their respective ages. Here, this is showing that around age 86 and 85 respectively for Paul and Linda is when they begin seeing the benefits from their early Roth conversions. Now, this didn't really sit well with them though. They looked at the early years of paying high taxes and didn't really feel comfortable with the trade-off. We did discuss the fact that there is some risk of not doing any Roth conversions at all, and that was something called the widow tax trap. This is when one spouse dies and the other is now placed into a single earner's tax bracket with high pre-tax accounts. Between Social Security and required minimum distributions, this can mean some high tax years. After some discussion, we decided to not do any Roth conversions and to stick with the baseline withdrawal strategy because the added tax benefit was just not worth it to Paul and Linda. And that's okay. The last variable we went through was Social Security timing. Here we used our Social Security optimizer in Income Labs to see what their recommended age was to begin benefits. We can see here that the recommended age was 70 for both Paul and Linda. They really liked that we were planning their retirement into their mid-90s since they wanted to make sure this plan would last to mitigate some longevity risk. Now, we wanted to make a slight tweak to the optimizer to see if putting in an opportunity cost would change the recommended age the benefits begin. Let me explain quickly what the opportunity cost is here. Now, when you begin taking Social Security benefits, you most likely take less money from your investment portfolio. Therefore, those funds stay in the portfolio and continue to grow. This opportunity cost percentage is the rate at which those funds would theoretically grow net of inflation. Using the analysis we did on the portfolio that Paul and Linda have, we can safely say that a 5% net return would be feasible. And as you can see here, the new optimized Social Security claiming age would be 69 for Paul and 68 for Linda. They were actually hoping to wait on Social Security to maximize their benefits as much as possible to make sure that their income stream is there in case of an early passing for either spouse. Not only that, but this also mitigates the widow's tax penalty, since they would withdraw much of their pre-tax funds prior to Social Security kicking in, which would ultimately reduce their RMDs. The big takeaway from all three variables was this: early retirement can work for Paul and Linda. But success isn't just about having $2 million in the bank. It's about understanding the timing of withdrawals, balancing tax strategies with comfort in the early years, and making Social Security decisions that protect against both longevity and survivor risks. That's a framework that applies to anyone thinking about stepping away from work before traditional retirement age. For Paul and Linda, early retirement at 60 isn't just possible, it's sustainable, as long as they manage the key variables we walked through today. And whether your number is 2 million or 1 million or somewhere in between, the same principles apply. If you're wondering whether your plan is truly ready for retirement, especially if you're thinking about retiring early, don't guess. Click the link below to answer a few questions, and within 48 hours, I'll send you a personalized retirement planning video specific to your situation. Let's run the numbers, stress test your assumptions, and make decisions based on a strategy, not a feeling. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.